All right, everybody, we are back here for Conversations with Rob. We are interviewing Kayla Tedder. She ran for school board in Polk County in District 3, got 18,000 votes as a first-time candidate, so congratulations from that. And while you were in high school at the time, right?
Yeah, my campaign started the beginning of my senior year.
Right, that's great. And I mean, that's pretty impressive, 18,000 votes. So just tell us about the campaign. Why did you get involved? Why did you want to run for this type of office?
Yeah, of course. Well, the Polk County school system is something that I've been deeply attached to for a while, having, grown up in the system,
Sure.
basically. And in doing so, I saw a lot of the problems in our community, a lot of the struggles that my own teachers were facing that were directly impacting my classroom experience and my ability to get the education that I deserve. And so in seeing that, I said, well, there has to be something that I personally can do to make a change, to make this happen. And that's when I discovered, hey, I could actually run for the school board. This isn't, crazy. Other people have done it. Why not?
So as a student at George Jenkins School and running, I mean, how did the old Polk County students feel? Did a lot of them come up to you and say, hey, you're one of us, you're running this campaign? Was there a good, did you get people excited like that? The students that you were going to school with, students from other schools around that maybe heard you were running as a student? How was that with the student?
It was kind of an interesting dynamic. There were definitely a lot of students at my school and schools in the area that were incredibly supportive. Most of our volunteers were high school students, with a couple exceptions like my fantastic campaign manager. But, there were also definitely a few students that were more like, this is funny, more so than not, and didn't really take it seriously until later. But, for the most part, students were incredibly supportive.
Now, do you feel most of your support was from the students, or did you get a lot of support from, I guess the terminology, maybe older people, or maybe middle-aged people? How did you feel the support was from the youngest people to the older voters, I guess you
It
could
was
say?
really kind of a mixed bag, and I kind of tracked how the demographics responded. A lot of the younger people were very supportive. Then as you kind of got more towards middle age up to 50-ish, it kind of, waned. And then when you got to the older crowd, about 65 plus, they were actually pretty supportive. They were like, yes, we want younger people in office. We need to be helping the next generation of leadership get their footing,
Yeah. Now, I watched a lot of your videos and kind of followed your campaign throughout. And one of the big issues, and I mean, we don't just see this in your campaign, we see this in pretty much any campaign, Congress, governor. We saw a lot of school safety. We saw Parkland happen within the past year, almost turning up on a year. So what was your take on school safety? Was that a big issue for you in your campaign? And can you talk about that?
So I'll be quite frank, school safety was not a priority for me until Parkland happened. It wasn't really on our campaign's radar. But then, the tragedy occurred, and after that, I feel like a lot of people realized the drastic changes that actually need to be made. And it's unfortunate that such an incident had to take place for us to really internalize that.
Sure.
And so when that occurred, I almost immediately jumped in to help organize a student walkout at George Jenkins to make sure that those students had a moment of silence and were able to process what had happened. And I started incorporating school safety into my platform, making sure that, we have the security that we need. And I don't see that so much in terms of necessarily armed personnel within schools. But for example, at my own high school, George Jenkins, there were many times that I was personally running late as a student, and I just walked on campus. Nobody, knew that I was, late. I just walked right into my second period, missed my first. Nobody asked me any questions. I could have been a stranger. I could have been somebody who just walked in off of the street. And that lack of security, especially after Parkland, really stood out to me and is honestly quite frightening when we think about our students.
And even to go more into this topic, of school safety, we've seen people that have been running for governor, senate, whatever it may be, even the president say, teachers need guns in schools. And for me, and full disclosure, I do teach. So I mean, that's scary. You think about a teacher with a gun. Maybe they may have some mental issues that nobody may know about. But what happens if the teacher gets tackled by the student and steals the gun off the teacher and starts shooting? I mean, what do you think about teachers with guns? I think it's scary for me.
Honestly, I think it's a mix of scary, and then also I think of every time somebody tells me about the potential of teachers carrying weapons, I think back to my English teacher, who's a typical little old lady, short white hair, bakes cookies on Friday, and I try to imagine her with a 9mm or any other gun, and I'm like, that just doesn't seem like Miss Bell.
I could understand that. And, like I said, you worry about teachers. Maybe, older person that's a teacher gets tackled. It's in some bad could happen.
We've seen in other counties and other states, even a teacher armed with a gun accidentally shoots a student in the leg. I don't think that's helping student safety. I think that's contributing to the problem.
Right. Yeah, it's scary. And to go even more into that topic, we talk about school safety. We talk about bullying, and which is a big issue, and that could contribute. I mean, you go back to Columbine and you see the bullying that happened and that turned into a gun safety issue. But what was your take in the campaign? Did you hear a lot about bullying in schools? And even if not, what would be your take if you did win that seat about bullying?
Well, we actually ran something that we called our school safety roundtable. We invited community leaders, community members, students, etc., from around the county, and basically sat down in a circle, had a giant whiteboard, and started writing out all of our ideas. And in that, of course, bullying definitely came up.
Of course, yes.
And I was bullied as a child all through middle school and early high school. So it's a topic that really hits close to home for me. And it definitely contributes to the problem. It's something that we should be addressing, and that can't really take place from the top down. When administrators, teachers, etc., give those bullying lessons in school and try to talk to students about the real effects of bullying, it more or less honestly goes over their head. They understand it, of course, well, we understand it, but the bullying lessons become more of a joke than anything else.
Yeah.
So my take on it is more to reform that, look for student leaders willing to carry on the message and represent it, something that can grow from the inside and be a grassroots effort among student leadership more so than anything else.
So really, to go back into this, what made you, get involved like this as far as this school district seat? I mean, I hear what you're saying about all these issues that seem like they're very important to you, but at such a young age, what made you get, involved in politics? Have you been following politics your whole life?
So I love this story. One of the first recollections I have when it comes to the political world, as it were, I was about 8 years old, and they took us into this gathering hall at our school, all of the students in the elementary school, and they had this big projector screen up. And we were like, what's going on? What is this? Well, they started playing Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. And I was just absolutely stunned. I mean, just visually speaking, it's a huge inauguration ceremony. This is obviously important to our nation. I didn't really understand the implications of it as an 8 or 9-year-old, but I understood that it was something that was important. And I look around, and all of the students around me, dead asleep. And I'm
not surprised at that age.
And I'm like, this is so important.
It's great. Yeah. I mean, that's great at such a young age to, get into politics. For me to get into politics, it took to like 8th or 9th grade, but you at such a young age, I mean, that's pretty impressive. So, I mean, most people your age, 18 years old, they're in high school. They're not thinking about running for office. They're thinking about what they're going to do on the weekend, who they're going to hang around with as friends. But you wanted to run for school board. That's just impressive. So now running for that and going through that race, getting those 18,000 votes. Now you're in college at USF, I believe. Now you're studying law. Now, is that just like a prelude to a career in politics, or do you really want to go into law, or do both maybe?
Well, I'm actually at a point where I'm kind of a little bit conflicted, if I'm being quite honest.
Okay.
I thought I had it absolutely all planned out. Ask
Sure.
me a year ago. I knew exactly what was going on. And now things are a little bit different. I'm majoring in political science, so yes, pre-law,
Oh,
but I'm
okay.
also minoring in environmental policy. So I'm very much so getting into environmental advocacy, global sustainability, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So I'm not sure where that will take me in terms of law school and after, but law school is definitely in the tracks. If that leads to a larger political career, great. If not, great. Hopefully I can make some change in the environmental world.
Well, that's great. I mean, we do need climate change is real, and it's really, as the temperatures out right now, freezing cold and all over the country. I mean, we definitely know that there's something happening right now. But the last couple of questions to go before I let you go, we got about 4 or 5 questions left. Let's just talk about the biggest problems in education. We did talk about the safety issues. Did you, as running, I'm kind of new to Polk County and new to teaching, and I could go on, but I want to hear from you. What were the issues that you saw in education besides bullying, school safety? Did you see any other issues that that are big problems that we have to fix?
Our largest problem right now, end all be all, is teacher retention nationwide and especially in Florida. But that in itself is not a problem. It is a symptom of all of the other problems we're having, like the lack of respect for teachers, like the lack of teacher pay, like the lack of professional autonomy given to teachers, like the lack of job security with the new annual contract system. All of those lead to teachers feeling like they're not respected as the professionals that they are. And that creates a system that no one wants to be part of. So if with their bachelor's degree or master's degree or any other qualifications they have, they can go get a better paying job where they're going to actually be respected and given the autonomy they deserve, why wouldn't they? And that's the root of our teacher problem as it stands.
Right. I mean, as a teacher, and you have kids tell you to shut up. They want to put their headphones in the ears, look at their phones all day. And at the school I'm at, I'm not sure if you ran into this problem. I'd love to hear your input on this, kind of off topic, but not. One of the schools I was teaching at before I went to this new school, they had a cell phone as a learning device. Mm-hmm. They did go away from that the year after that when I left, but I mean, as a teacher, that's really hard, and I understand that the more low income kids, maybe they don't have computers, and a lot of schools they don't fund well, so they don't have computers. But did you run into that in high school or even?
So at George Jenkins, we had a cell phone policy where we would put our phone in a manila envelope at the beginning of class, and then we were able to then at the end of class take our phone out of the envelope. The problem that created, however, was teachers would always lose their manila envelopes, have to replace them, etc. Students would leave their phones in class, so they would constantly run late to their next class. And it didn't solve the cell phone problem whatsoever. It just made people smarter about hiding it. So realistically, I'm sorry, but I don't think you're going to solve the cell phone problem unless you physically take the phone from them.
Right.
And even still, that's not necessarily a viable option for many. And it can be used as a learning device.
Agreed,
for
yes.
sure. We shouldn't, put a damper on that because of our other fears. We should be utilizing technology as, positive means. And if we are able to incorporate it better into the classroom, then yes, they get to play on their phones, but what they're actually doing is a Kahoot game where they're actually studying, etc. We're incorporating it into the classroom.
Well, the last 2 questions. We talked about problems in the education system, and you really elaborated on that well. I believe one of the big problems is the teacher testing. I mean, the student testing, rather. You're evaluating teachers on how well a student tests. I know as my own person, taking the SATs, I'm sure you've probably taken the SATs, the ACTs, all these standardized tests, and some people just don't do well on tests. I know a lot of colleges so starting to go away from that. But I mean, you gotta believe in that, and I'm sure you do. These tests are not helping teachers; they're really hurting the retention, as you spoke about.
So standardized testing was a large part of my platform when I was running, and Polk County especially has been in the past few years fairly bad when it comes to standardized testing, for lack of a better term. Now, they have gotten better in the last year or two, but before that, we had what was called an end-of-course exam, and in those EOCs, we could be forced to take them in areas such as dance. I remember in one exam specifically, there was a camera set up in the corner of the room, and I had to perform 30 seconds of a memorized combination, and then it was sent off to someone at the county level to then judge me on my dancing ability, which, by the way, I don't have any. So you can see that test did not go well for me. And we had a Latin 2 exam written by a Spanish teacher at the county level. Not a Spanish teacher from this county even, it was a Spanish teacher from a different county.
Yeah.
So there were some fundamental problems with these exams, beyond just the high stakes, but beyond just the incorporating it for teacher pay, student, evaluation, etc. In terms of student evaluation, though, you're absolutely right. Colleges are moving away from looking at standardized testing. I mean, there are many that say, yes, submit your SAT scores, but we're not really putting that much weight on them. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because in order to look at a student holistically, you can't put so much weight on one day of their life. 4 hours, those 4 hours tell you virtually nothing about that person except their ability to game the SAT. And that's all it is.
Well, everybody learns different. There's visual, some people may do memorization, writing stuff out a bunch of times. So, I mean, you can't basically...
And some students have panic attacks prior to the test. Some people literally throw up on it. I mean, there's numerous things that can occur that just indicate you shouldn't place so much weight on this one day of their life.
So, last question, and then we're going to go into kind of a couple of fun questions. If you did win the office, well, first of all, would you run for a position again, regardless of school board? Would you think about dabbling into politics again down the road?
It's been brought up to me. I'm definitely not discarding it as an option for sure. Right. But if that's necessarily like what I want to do, that's still yet to be determined.
And if you did win the position, what would you? How do we fix the education budget? We see the past governors have took money from education, put it in different other places for their friends and stuff like that. We've seen the legislator dabble into moving money around. What would you do? I mean, obviously we do want more funding, but any other things that you would do with the education budget to put more, emphasis on certain aspects of it, I guess?
Well, first of all, we need to have an education budget bigger than the one we do now.
It's such a huge state. Yeah.
It's Florida. It's a giant state. Consider how many students we have alone. It just doesn't make sense that we're not valuing the future of our country how we're supposed to. It doesn't make sense whatsoever. So that's one way to fix it. But also, what I'd like to see is a shift back towards the arts, a shift back towards vocational education. Polk County is really great about that, and they're getting better, but I don't think the state of Florida as a whole is there yet. And realistically, we've seen a trend in the younger generations towards vocational education, especially with the costs of college rising. So this is a realistic way to ensure that our students have a means for survival post-high school. We should definitely be funding it fully and incorporating it into our educational system at large.
All right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then as far as the arts is concerned, we've seen how that's helped improve students just overall, and even has improved their standardized test scores. So if we're still on that train.
Well, as a teacher in one of my schools, and I don't know if this happens in Polk County because I am in Osceola, but there's a lot of busing. Mm-hmm. Busing kids from one area could be 20 miles down the road into another school. We have in the school that I'm at, a big homeless problem there with a lot of kids that are homeless, and they come to school to kind of get away from a lot of problems. It's really sad, and I've dealt with a lot of kids with problems like that. Do you see that in Polk County with a lot of busing to different schools?
Yeah, so, and actually there is a reason why. One of the, in about the first 3 months, I want to say, of my campaign, the issue came to my attention. And a lot of people were complaining on Facebook about zoning, new zoning, etc. And so I looked into it. I pulled up the bus route maps and things like that. And I started to look at, well, why is it that you have a school over in one area of the county, and it's got a little concentric circle around it of students that go to it, and then just off to the side is like another little bubble that also gets zoned to it. Why is that? So in asking these questions, I actually found out that the Polk County school system was ruled as segregated not too long ago. So in order to make sure that our schools aren't actively segregated, we have to have a weird busing situation. Now, is there room for improvement? Maybe, but I really don't think it's as much as people think. These busing maps were incredibly thought over after the court ruling, so...
Well, that's all I really have for you. I really appreciate you taking time to do this interview and, fighting the good fight. I mean, like I said, 18,000 votes for a first-time candidate, no matter how old they are, is pretty impressive. I do hope you run down the road for something, and I wish you well. So, Kayla, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.